family member if it meant saving your business? We get asked questions around family business quite a bit. We work with a lot of restopreneurs who are family owned and run businesses, and there's a lot of challenges that come with that. A lot of folks have this misconception about family owned business. They think that family is going to care more and work harder because it's our business. But the truth of the matter is, it often leads to lower accountability and more frustration for everybody. In this podcast, we're going to talk about 5 different components of family owned businesses, some of the unique challenges of the family business, when loyalty to family hurts the business, the family business myth, and does blood really mean commitment? We're going to talk about setting boundaries, and then we're going to answer the question, should you fire a family member? Let's get into it.
What's up, buddy?
What's up, man? Ready to do this?
I'm looking forward to this one. I want to trigger warning. There are going to be a lot of people that can relate to this. And it's meant to address it head on and maybe take off the blinders, because we're hired to help deal with the business, but sometimes the business isn't the problem. The family, or even sometimes friends and family are the dynamics. So this one, what we have to do, Toby, is be careful not to bring up any specifics so that we deal with this on.
But no name dropping today.
No name dropping, but I you know who you are, and most of the time when we have these conversations, Toby, with family drama, we can't be a psychologist. We're certainly not a family therapist.
No marriage counselors either.
Most of the time people know what they need to do. It's just not happening. And there's good reasons for it. And we've got to own that. I mean, we believe family first, right? But I think what we want to uncover today, or what I want to hear us talk about, is sometimes we think we're doing our family a favor by keeping them in business, but we're actually hurting family. And I know that we've got some stories about that. Again, we can talk about some things in an abstract way, because I think a lot of people are going to relate to it. But good topic. Have you ever worked directly with a family member in a business that you were in?
So funny story. When I was in college, I had the summer off, and I went to work with one of he was my best friend, childhood best friend. I went to work with him out of town for the whole summer, and it was fun at first. We had a lot of good time, but because we were best friends, we were still trying to do best friend stuff, when we were done with work. So we spent all summer together, and we became more like brothers than best friends, in the bad sense of being brothers. And I would say that it certainly impacted our relationship. Yeah, we're fine now, still really good friends, fine now, but for a couple of years it was very different. Our relationship was a lot different, and it made such an impact on me that I established early on. Actually, before I even started my business, when I was thinking about it, I said, I will never have family working in my business, and I will never work for family ever again, because I did view him as family. So it certainly had an impact on me, and my wife and I had that agreement when I was starting my business, that she has some skill set that really uh, could have benefited my company, but we chose that she wasn't going to be involved in the business, and we were going to keep it separate, just because I personally have such a hard time relating business and personal. It's like oil and water for me. It just doesn't work. Now, I've got a lot of family that has family businesses, and it works very well for them. I applaud them in many ways. I envy them, but I know my limits, and that's where it needs to stay.
Yeah, I grew up in family business. My parents owned dry cleaners, and I was slave child labor for a long time, and it's just what I learned to do. And I eventually learned how to do everything in. It's like much like a restoration business, is knowing how to suck water and do the books. I could operate several of our own locations, but It wasn't a problem other until there's an identity. Like you've got to eventually break out and be your own person. And that's different than family. But my deal was my father was very, very, very big in our industry, and I was always his son. So there's a lot to live up to. Uh, but we, worked out. It didn't get to where Thanksgiving was incredibly awkward or anything. And then later in my career in this restoration disaster, there have been times where some of my sons have come in to work with me, and I gave them assistant project manager, superintendent jobs, and they loved the money, but they didn't love the industry, the travel, the last minute, and they didn't love that no matter what, it was going to be harder on them than anybody else, from me and from other people too. So that created some real, because I have no issues with some of the things we're going to talk about today. I had no issues holding them accountable and maybe too much. And then of course you're talking about spouses and wives. My wife has always said, "There's no way on earth I'm working for you because not that I'm an ogre, but she goes, you are all business when it comes to business." And she said, "I'm still your boss, and I know everything about you, and I'm not going to let you treat me that way." But no, she would certainly. But so we keep it there. But some people don't. Some people in restoration, Toby, um, grew up in the business. Father has succeeded it to them. They have done a buyout. There's siblings in businesses, kids, aunts and uncles, and I want to uncover some of that today because I know a lot of restaurateurs that said, "Man, if I just had dad out of the way or mom and dad out of the way or something, they're just holding this back." There's that feeling, which could be true, could be perception, but it causes friction. And especially as adult children get their own families, you're with someone 10 hours a day. You don't want to hang out with them on the weekend, and some of that bond separates. So, um, Toby, let's hit some of the obvious challenges from this.
Yeah, a few of them, and we can dive deeper into them, but a few of them that I've come across. There's this blurred line between business and personal life, and listen, in restoration, especially the nature of the industry as it is today, adjust your emails and Exactimate. Those are the two things that I would say carry over quite a bit. Now, obviously, in restoration, we've got the 24/7 family call, family. We got the 24/7 emergency service calls that we've got to respond to. And if you're a small business, a couple of guys, a couple of trucks, you're getting those more often than not. Um, so I would say those are kind of the on call rotation, taking Exactimate home and doing it on the couch while the family's watching a movie or something. Um, and some of those things are some of the common things that we see are blurring this line between business and personal. Um, some other things are entitlement and special treatment, difficulty enforcing accountability. I see this one a lot because a lot of what I do when I'm working with the business owners and the team is helping them understand what accountability is, putting a good accountability system in place. Um, and it gets really difficult when it's your kids or it's your siblings to really hold them accountable and hold them to the same standard that you are other people. It's easy to just let things slide with family members, and then that causes tension among people who aren't family members. So that's just a few of the things that I've seen when working with some of these business owners and
Yeah,
leaders. Really, it's not just the owners, but it's the leaders. Because sometimes what will happen is a GM will come in, and part of their role is to make sure that we're fully staffed. Well, they may have some family members that they can bring in, and now you've got a family of people that are working in different aspects of the business. That presents some complications as well.
yeah. Yeah, you uncovered a bunch of the ones that I would say we hear the most often. I always think about uh, at the dining table. Sunday meals turn into board meetings. It's a discussion about it's a whip meeting. We all know what a and that's listen. Maybe you get a lot more done when you're away from home, but for all the people in the family that don't work in this business, that makes no sense to most people. They're like, can y'all leave that at home or go to the office and do that? And so that happens. There definitely is some entitlement. There's sibling rivalry. you have brothers and sisters, and naturally one is going to love this industry and the other one's not, but it's a great paycheck and they're almost expected to do it. And anyone that you're doing something that you don't want to do, you're not going to do it very well, and it's going to show up in ways that again look like lazy or entitlement. You mentioned other employees say, I don't know that if unless I get married to someone in this family, I'm not going anywhere. But it looks like if I did marry somebody in the family, I could get away with murder, because a lot of people do get away with things. Wreck vehicles, take vehicles, and just break things that you have as company policies, but they've got asterisks by them. And that just doesn't sit well when you're trying to create a culture. I've known businesses that have employed a sibling or a sister or brother or whatever you want to say, an uncle, and employees say, gosh, say we really just pay them to maybe not be here as much. They're just here more than we want. So it's just, and I know there's some people probably listening that would have their own examples. I think another one that really creates, and this is more of a generational thing, Toby, and I know this was the case with my family and myself, is the way my parents grew their business, marketing, growth, sales, customer service. It worked for then, but it's a different world now. And I think our industry, especially when it comes to hiring, is a lot of previous generations want to stay small, while a new generation is like, well, I want to grow so that I can make a little more money, but somebody's holding them back because, we got to get experts. Well, we don't, we talk about a lot. 80% would be okay. No, I'm going to 110%. Well, those don't really exist. So there is different ideas on business tactics, and that, again, you might argue about that inside of a closed room, but it comes out because somebody gets into a truck with another team member and they're bitching about dad or they're bitching about their son, and then it just becomes is that supposed to be a secret of how you feel about your kid or what? So yeah, could be really bad.
Yes. Something you mentioned a minute ago was between the generational gap. Um, we've moved into a digital age, and some of the people that are actually still own and run the businesses, um, they're having a really hard time adapting to the digital age from a system standpoint, internal, job management, for instance. I recently have met with a company, and they really don't have any job management and system in place. They're working off of paper, group messages, and Google Calendar, kind of. So it's kind of all bolted together. And listen, it works for them at the size that they're at, and you know, it's okay for where they're at. But they have some ambitious goals, and the owner's sitting there thinking, "Holy smokes, I've got to pay for this platform and this platform and this platform," and he's looking at the dollar signs. And while his team, some of which he has some family members associated on the team, are saying, man, let's get in the 21st century and let's get some software, some apps, and let's make this thing go so we can get to our goals. And so that generational gap in the family is also an interesting one. Um, just being able to get into the digital age and understand how that whole process works.
I've talked to a few, even people that weren't quite customers, and we were just trying to uncover like what they're trying to do in their business to see if we could either help. And I've heard this before. It says, my dad's in the business and I'm waiting for him to get out so we can kind of catch up to the new century. And there's a lot of that
Yeah.
feeling. But then on the other side, Toby, me being in my 50s now, I'm one that says maybe there's something to it. I'm probably still I'm like teetering on that older generation, but I think that we overuse apps. I know people
Yeah.
tell me that the only thing holding them back is not having the right software. And I'm like, that's not true. But you feel like it is. So,
Mm.
but I definitely understand why one generation wants to have whiteboards and they don't want to take risk. And
Yeah.
we're not gonna get more equipment. We've been fine with these 40 fans for 30 years. but
Yeah. Yeah.
but all of a sudden you've got a younger generation that comes in and turns on some marketing, and the phone's ringing a lot more, and now all of a sudden it looks like it's chaos to some generations. And yeah,
Yeah.
and then and then just some people who just think that they want siblings that might have two different ideas of what this, like
Mm.
one person. I'm thinking of a specific. This is one of those ones where I have a brother and a sister. The sister everything is the company. I mean, it's day, night, weekends, picnics, dinners. It's business in some way. Always on call, phone's ringing, comes to her. Brother's like, man, I want to turn that crap off. I want to relax. We can deal with it tomorrow. It has a better understanding of urgent and important. And it just causes it. One feels like the other one doesn't care. But I think what I've told her before, I said, I think they just care about something different and a little bit
Mm,
more. And that's where that disconnect is. And rightfully so, the female of that sibling doesn't have, her kids are all grown. So the work is, so I'm saying things here, and I know you are. I want to bring up probably topics and scenarios that exist in maybe some people listening. And then now we can't fix them, but we can certainly talk about what it looks like from the outside. A lot of times, Toby, family issues come from a loyalty, a sense of loyalty. It's blood's thicker than water, whatever cliche, whatever thing you want to say is, it's my brother. This is the way, I told my dad that when he bought it, that, I've got a brother that's not quite as business savvy, but I told them that they would never have to worry. And I've got loyalty to them. But meanwhile, they're out driving the truck drunk and running customers off and chewing out adjusters and just really just making a mess of and setting a bad example. So, I think we've already talked about a family member who refuses to adapt, who they ignore the policies, like the policies, the core values. I like them, but they don't apply to me. I built this place with my dad built this place. There's you mentioned entitlement, and it's 100% entitlement. Someone says, and this is, I think it was 2 episodes ago we had of our podcast talking about leadership in the field. Well, this is where the policies have to matter to everybody equally, and honestly more. The leaders of the company, the siblings, have to show up. But I'm sitting here, my head is rumming through a lot of family dynamics that are that just get away with murder, and I just realize what that does downstream. That even the people, the family members, they don't hear it. They're just tone deaf because they just feel like people just don't understand. It's my brother. This is how it's going to be. I think there's ways to get around it where you don't have to let it continue. But sometimes I think, Toby, you always say it's, how about we pay that brother that doesn't do anything to not be here?
well, yeah. So you and I both know that we actually have a scenario where we have asked that very question. If you've got somebody that's a family member that's presenting issues, presenting obstacles for the rest of the team, and they don't maybe feel that they belong in another company or going to get another job, if it's causing enough friction with the team, what does it look like to pay them to just not be a factor? Because if you can be more efficient without that person present, but for whatever reason that person is not able to go outside the company for whatever reason, let's just eliminate the problem. We're paying them, they're causing friction. Let's remove the friction, and we can probably make more money despite the fact that we're paying them. Lots goes into that, but I mean, listen, in business, you got to do what you got to do. Um, but talking about the loyalty and things along those lines, I think it's important, and I think that's what this whole conversation is about. Is it goes back to what I always say: business is binary. It's actually pretty simple. It's not easy, but it's pretty simple. It's pretty black and white, right? Like if you've got a good accountability system and structure in place, then you can say just because somebody's a family member does not mean they're a good fit for the business. But you've got to have that framework and that structure and system in place in order to be able to identify that. Um, when loyalty overrides the business needs, you end up keeping somebody that's not qualified to be in leadership. Um, you said it, allowing the family to break the rules without consequences hurts the culture. And then family members thinking that they're untouchable sets a horrible precedent for the rest of the team.
Mm. I think ego comes a lot into it. I'm thinking of a
Yeah.
case here where two brothers that I know, one is completely risky, um, went on a kind of like a 2-year bender where they were just going out and chasing a lot of work and getting a lot of like commercial jobs from kind of a sketchy situation, but they weren't getting contracts. It was all handshake deals, and they kept getting burned. They never made quite what they needed to make. They broke even. But this brother thought that he was contributing to the energy and to the he wasn't bringing any profit. He was adding revenue on the books, but he was really
Mm.
just downstream. He was burning out his sibling. He was burning out the employees, the bookkeeper that was trying to chase the money down, the ARs. And when you're trying to collect money and you don't have a contract, it's kind of hard. And and that actually is one case where if I don't know now, but I know they they parted ways and they are
Mm.
not speaking. So now all of a sudden you don't just fire an employee, you fire a brother, you fire a sister or a parent or a child. That's
It
different.
cuts deeper. It
That
cuts a
hits
lot
different.
deeper.
It
Yeah.
does. And then mom is at home like, what did you do to our family? The loyalty. Where's your loyalty to your brother? And well, mom, you weren't there with what all was going on. Yeah, but y'all could have worked it out, So you get parents or other family members that don't understand how bad it was. And that's why a lot of people avoid doing something about it. So I think we just, we're uncovering why it's not so. Family's not binary, right? You're 100% right. Business is business. Our business is not feeding us the way we want. We're not growing. Other people are coming into town, competitors, but we're not doing very well. But by gosh, it's our family business, and at least my brother's here working with me.
Yeah.
It's not great. So yeah, I think loyalty is a big part of it. And again, big fan of it. You should be loyal to family, but I would use that loyalty in other places and not in
Mm.
here because and in my gut I think that when there's conflict between family, neither side likes it. They're not doing it like, "Hi, I got you." It's like they just don't have an option, or they don't know what their option is, and they should be looking for another position in the company or out of the company. And
Yeah.
then they both say, "Well, I'm not leaving. You're leaving." No, I'm not leaving. You're leaving.
Yeah. I think it's important to note at this point in the conversation that we're speaking about the challenges of family and business. But on the flip side of that coin is there's lots of examples of family businesses working very, very well. We've got some clients that we worked with for a long time. Husband, wife, they brought one of their children into the business, and few years down the road, the business is exactly where they wanted it to be. The family members are stepping up, stepping in, and they're starting to really take on their role and lead the company well, leaving the owners in a position where they've been dreaming of for a long time, and they haven't been able to achieve it until just the last couple of years. So, um, I've got some personal family who's in the last 10 years have started or purchased and are running a multi-million dollar, multi-state operation. Um, and it's all run by a father and his sons. It's going very, very well for them. So, we're talking about a lot of the challenges, but I just want to point out to anybody that's listening that it can work. You just have to be completely brutally honest with everyone, have clear roles, have clear accountability, and be afraid and not be afraid to have those hard conversations.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about the same family, if we're talking about the children actually became partners. They took ownership stake, and they're this is their future, and they might want to do something else, but they agreed that look, if you really want to let me run this thing, and I'm getting a vote and a stake in it, then and that's how it took a while. There's a transition there. I think I was watching your video last week with JT Cray on the transition. It's the transition and the transaction are two different things. Like just awarding someone shares, calling some people the owner, your kid's the owner, that's a binding legal document. but that doesn't have anything to do with what's going to happen after. So that's a good situation. Toby, I know two very, very, very large national, the biggest franchise, the Green Trucks, two sets of brothers that both operate different companies, and they're both well over $100 million, and they know, they identify their strengths and their weaknesses, and they run with it. And do they disagree on stuff? Yeah, I've seen it, but not in front of anyone. I will say I've watched these brothers on both sides. One way more animated than the other set, but disagree on how to handle. Like, you've been putting up with that person for too long. Well, that person hired them, and their loyalty even runs beyond family. But they say the same thing that we say, GGOTO, greater good of the organization. It's like, what, we've built something here. We've got 72 employees that depend on this company, or 86 or 110. We gotta think about them. And we can't let this kind of stuff happen. But this, in this case, it really, but yes, I know some father and son teams that are as close. They can't imagine not working together. And dude, I'm gonna tell you right now that I envy that. I'm sure you do too. That is special. I would love to have had that type of bond. And even today, my parents are gone, but I would love to have, like, I look forward to Monday morning getting to go work with my dad, my pops, and that would be that'd be a pretty, and I know you're close to your dad, but he doesn't want to do disaster work. Toby, let me throw in back to the pain side of it, to the negative side. And when we get these calls, Clark, I've got this issue with my brother, my son, my daughter, my uncle. I know it's easy, but you need an outside voice. What would you do with this person if they weren't related to you? What would that one-on-one look like? What are other people waiting for you to do? And the answer to the question was like, well, I probably would fire them. Well, that might be the right answer. And I know it's hard, but other people are waiting for you to do that. But that's, if you're asking yourself today, what do I do about it? Just look at it. It's a business, and there can be some cussing and screaming and fighting. There might be a couple of months of silence, and you might not have to buy them a Christmas present, and might save yourself a little money from buying Christmas presents. But I think people, if loyalty and blood is thicker than water, it eventually, when they find a new place and a new home and a new passion, it works out. Especially, depends on the family and depends on how you are. But I will say that's not one of those things you can avoid, because you're doing more damage to all of it by doing nothing than if you would just rip the Band-Aid off and go. Do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. We're talking about family, and the conversation is the conversation with someone that there's conflict is always more challenging when there's family involved. But I can say unequivocally that when I've had conversations with owners about employees that aren't a good fit for the role that they're in, maybe not even a good fit for the company, everyone knows it. Everyone already knows it. So we're just not talking about the thing that everyone already knows. So, family or not, this is the principle that applies to any situation. Have the hard conversation, because 9 times out of 10, the person that's causing the conflict knows that there's conflict. They may not recognize that it's because of them, but when we get to a point where we can acknowledge it face to face with those people, everyone looks around and says, "Why didn't that happen sooner?" Even exactly, 100%, even the person that's involved. And when we get to the point where we can acknowledge that the position or the person fulfilling the position may need to go outside the organization to find work, to get a new job, um, they're often relieved. Once all the chaos of the moment has died down and they get settled into a new position, they'll say, I wish I'd have done this a long time ago. Because now they're not working in a position where they know that there's conflict, and maybe they know that they're causing the conflict, but now they're in a new role, a new position, a new environment, and all that is gone, and they're feeling better about life in general. So having the hard conversations is hard, but on the other side of hard is calm for everyone. And a lot of times people will say, why didn't that happen sooner?
Hey, I'm thinking of another circumstance, and this one is even more complicated. Let's say that you've got a brother and sister or two siblings working as partners, and you employ your nephew or your niece, and they are not a good employee. And now all of a sudden you're getting a second layer of loyalty. The parent of that child who not doing, they don't want to be the bad person. They don't want to upset their family. So they won't let anyone else at all touch their kid and reprimand them and hold them accountable. And then that again, it creates the same issue as what we're talking about. But man, I'm thinking of a couple times where two brothers, and then they had hired one of them's son, who I think he might have had a little bit of an addiction problem, but it was really not at work, but it was really affecting performance. And
Mm,
and the kid just needed it. This wasn't the job for him. It was hard work. It was messing with his extracurricular life and activities where he had to figure it out. And I think now he's okay. But at that point in his life, this was not the job for him or what he's going through. But the fight between the two, when one brother said, "We got to let go of my nephew," and he's like, "You're not doing that at all," and that again, it ups it. Like you can talk about me all you want to, but you talk about my kid, I fall into mother hen mode, and I start like really getting protective. So I do know some situations like that. But um, Toby, let's just blurt out what two family members or four or eight. I know someone that has five or seven family members in their company, and they have all these different personalities. But what do you think it looks like for them to do? Should they do an offsite and say, come to some agreements? Should they do that somewhere, just at a resort or something, or a golf course, or what should they do to make sure they're holding each other accountable and that they're listening to what other people are seeing?
well, you know me. I always have to go deeper than the symptom, right? Like if the symptom is we're not getting along, let's really dig down and figure out what the root of it is. Nine times out of ten, what I find is that we don't have a common purpose and we're not constrained by the same values. That's where conflict arises. Um, and blood doesn't mean commitment, right? So if the business and the whoever is the lead person in the family in the business, um, if they are operating with a purpose in mind and the business culture, that's I'm going to use that loosely because if there's a bunch of family conflict, then the culture is subpar at best. But um, if the culture is operating with a purpose of some sort in mind, and there's some semblance of values based on the person leading the organization, and the rest of the family is not aligned with that, you're going to have conflict. That's just all there is to it. So I always go back to that. We've got to start there. But that to answer your question in part, yes, I think you go away for a day with the leadership of the organization and maybe even the family members who may be on the fringes of the leadership team and get a common purpose, figure out the values of the organization so that we can all be aligned. Through that process, it will become clear who's on board and who's not. And at that point, you can have the hard conversation to say, look, we're doing our best to get everybody on board, and we're just not feeling it here. We need to have a conversation about the next steps to figure out, are you going to get on board? Can you get on board? Or is this the point in time where we need to say, this is the end of the road for you being part of this organization? Still family. We're going to still have Thanksgiving dinner, and we should try to do it amicably, obviously. But um, for the greater good of the organization, you've got to get super clear on where we're going as a team, who we're serving, and how we're going to do it, and what team members are going to be part of that.
And if we don't do that, then we've got to suffer the consequences. We don't really have a good business, and we're not going to make our dreams come true. I have a question for you, Toby. And this is Toby, I want to ask you this question, and I want maybe if anybody wants to comment in a family dynamic in business, and maybe not a father and son or a mother and son, like a parental thing, but of peers, lateral. Does one need to be, does some, so every business needs a leader, but does one of them need to be the leader? If you've got two brothers, and obviously we're going to have the older brother, younger brother, but does somebody need to be in charge, or can they be equal?
They can be equal, but they're not going to be the same. That's a very important distinction.
Mm,
Typically, you'll have one who's more of a visionary type, and then the other one's going to be the more boots on the ground, operations minded person.
yeah.
Um, I've gone into so many situations wondering how this would shake out. And every single time, without fail, there's one who's more charismatic, more of a people person, more the type of person you would see in business development or at a social event, going around and meeting with everybody. And then the other sibling, the other peer, is more of a tactile, process oriented person who would rather just sit at a table with a small group of people, not
Yeah.
putting themselves out in a social type of
Right.
event.
Yeah.
So to your point, yes, they can be equal, but they will not be the same. And it's so important for them to understand their strengths and the strengths of the other, and for them to learn to complement each other.
Yeah. So I'm just, but they both have to completely agree that the standard is the standard, and if they don't
Yes.
agree, then someone, the one that thinks that, like, when crap hits the fan, someone has to make the hard decisions, and it might really really be tense, and I think that's where, when you don't clarify that somebody's in charge, not of their brother or their sister, but of charge of the decisions that have to be made, and it could be from a better brain of thinking of those things. So yeah, that's really interesting to hear. But I do believe that a business can't have multiple leaders, and 100. I do believe it's 50.5 and 49.5. I just think
Yeah,
there has
yeah.
to be,
I
because
guess.
you get
Yeah. So
locked
I'm
up, and
thinking in.
you get locked up into a stalemate when we don't agree, so we're going to do nothing at all. We're just going to continue with the toxicity of whatever it is that's happening. What we're going to say?
Right. Well, I'm in 100% agreement with you. I guess where I was coming from was in terms of ownership and thinking about an org chart, for example, for a
Mm,
visual, right?
yeah,
Those two brothers or those two siblings, peers, whatever you want to call them, they're equal in terms of the business. But if they've clarified their roles properly, it's going to be abundantly clear who's going to make the hard calls.
yeah,
And that's to carry my analogy further from how I explained it earlier, is they're equal, but their roles, when properly clarified, will dictate who makes the decisions on what parts of the business.
yeah.
And that's where they have to be able to complement each other.
Well, and then you're going to always fall into this: is someone's going to fight for the part of the business that they're most passionate about, but it might not be the one they need the most work on right now. So someone says, "I want to get that new software." I said, "Software is not our problem. Converting jobs is our problem. Quality of the work is our problem. Invoicing and getting our collections down, that's our problem. Our software is not doing that." But I know that there's one brother or sister that loves the software. You got to have those conversations and saying, "Yeah, you know what, you're right. We'll do that next quarter." Uh, Tobe, let's again identify when it's time, because I want people to know, if you need to fire anyone in your company, you need to know why you have to do it. And it doesn't matter if it's family or not, but I know that if it's family, it's harder. But there's some telltale signs. Uh, what would be reasons to fire someone? Again, now, just like anybody, some people hold their family members to a higher extreme, and I'm going to fire you. And we haven't had these sessions to coach you up. It's going to coach you out. You need to follow the same thing you would for anybody in the company. But if they don't take the job seriously, if they're just drawing a paycheck, probably time to talk. It might even, coaching isn't going to help. If they don't love what they do, you're not going to convince them to start loving it, unless they're just in the wrong seat. their work ethic is dragging the rest of the team down. Nobody wants to work with that sibling. They love their job, but man, when we work with Billy, it's just negative. It's lazy. We end up having to work harder. I'd rather work with that brand new rookie that doesn't know anything, because at least they can help me carry some of these drywall trash bags down, because the brother doesn't think they can do anything. They refuse to clock in and clock out. They refuse to train anyone on the software. They quit. They don't adapt, and then they just get away with everything, and it causes frustration. And you start losing. You're going to lose good people. Is what you're going to do. So those are reasons to have a conversation. Is, do I have a family dynamic that I need to coach up or coach out? Toby, let's go back for just a minute. I'm jumping all over here. I was going to tag on the end of your personality side. I want anyone listening, if the only way you ever engage with us at Restoration Advisors is get a hold of us and let us walk you through doing some disc assessments. I want you and your sibling or your family member, and just even non-family, your employees, knowing people's personality, what fires them up, what burns them out, what makes them scared and happy. Getting good at reading that will make you better at everything in the business. Your customers, your vendors, your subcontractors. You need to have these tools. It's a tool like learning how to drive a building. You don't know how to do it. You don't know how to do it until you do. You can just learn some tactile lessons in personality assessments. You'll get to a point where you just kind of read people a little better. I would challenge you, don't judge people, but you can kind of tell what fires them up and what makes them uncomfortable, where their borders are. Reach out to us. We are certified coaches in that. And if that's all we do, and that is an area where I'm a certain way, my general manager is a certain way, great. You both probably contribute in incredible way, but let's figure out how to put fuel into that and really make that as an asset, not a liability. So reach out to us for whether it's disc. We have a couple of different type of personalities depending on what you're trying to figure out. But we have owners, right, Toby, that just like me and my brother, we love this business, but we don't love that part of it. We wish we weren't in that. We aren't delegating enough. Well, then there's a delegation question. So, but certainly I've watched people fire family. It's tough. And I've watched people not fire family. And I think that's tougher. I think that the end net result is that procrastination of doing what you have to do. It hurts deeper. The band-aids are bigger, you bleed longer, and it eventually burns you out because you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, honestly, I mean the old analogy of infection, right, is if it doesn't heal properly, skin grows over top of the infection. It just gets down deeper into the body, and it causes bigger problems. It's the same thing here. If we just continue to gloss over the issues and we don't properly address them, it's just going to affect the entire organization. It's accidental. It's 100% accidental. But you've got to address it. And if you want to take the company where you believe it can go.
I think way more small businesses have family dynamics than they don't. I think in the trades and a service industry, I believe that there's far more businesses that have some type of family connection. So this conversation should be landing pretty well on some people. We had a client for a while out of Kentucky who took a business over from his father, still ran the business for the longest time because he heard his father's voice in his head. Like, I don't want to it's almost like I don't want to discredit what my dad built by changing it too much. And that's a real thing you have to overcome, is like, well, you're not changing it. You're evolving it. You're adapting to the new way. Your dad wouldn't want to see it fall and fail. No, it wouldn't. So it's getting out of like, this is going to look different than my mother and father in it. Well, it should be, because Blockbuster is gone, and grocery shopping is different. So
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up because I was about to take it the other direction, right? Like you were referring to the child taking it over from the parent.
mhm.
We have a lot of business owners that we work with that part of their long-term plan is to have something for their children in the future, right? So they need to be establishing now the fundamental systems and processes for their business so that when they hand it off to their children, there's things built into the business that's going to guide the children to do it their way, and to implement new strategies more modern for the time that the time period that they're taking it over in. So um, put the stuff in place now if that is part of your plan long term, so that your children don't have to deal with those things.
Yeah, that's the worst, is to leave your kids with your own junk. Toby, I'll finish this off with this. I watch a lot of YouTube. I love watching YouTube, and I love knives. Anyone that doesn't know this, I have a big knife collection, and I'm watching this video 2 nights ago. It's not even in English; it's in Japanese, and it's got subtitles. And my wife's looking over like, they're not speaking English, and I was like, "Oh, let me put my headphones in. Leave me alone. This is my therapy." This is a 93-year-old man that hand makes knives, mostly kitchen
Mm,
knives, but he just makes other different things. Working in this shop that doesn't have a front door, and it's probably 800 square feet, and he's literally fire casting and doing all this stuff. And in the shop is his son, which is probably 50s, maybe 55, and then his grandson. And the way he's talking about it is like, well, my son, he's getting there. He's been doing this with me 30 years, and he's getting there. Like, grandpa thinks that I'm 94 and I'm just now getting good. And then grandson is like, well, what about me? He's like, nah, you got a long way to go.
long way
but
to go.
it's really funny that everything moves faster now, and people want the mastery title, to be the expert earlier and sooner and quicker. But you've
Yeah.
got someone, you feel like your parent or somebody else is holding you back, because they're probably helping you by saying you're going to face some really big struggles and you're not ready yet, as opposed to, you're a yellow belt, but you're going to get in the ring with the black belt. Well, you're going to find out real quick how unready you are. So it was real funny
Yeah.
to watch this guy say, yeah, my son's 55 and he's been doing this 30 years and he's getting better. It's like, wow, how good I got to be 30 years in. So I hope no one in this business, I mean, I don't even know, our industry is barely 35 years old. So if you've been doing this 35 years and you aren't good yet, you should be. But I watch a lot. We're seeing a lot of second and third generation now, Toby, just because of the
Yeah.
age of this industry. And it's interesting, and they certainly look at business a completely different way. So what I would say there is, it might not need to be toxic, but just because generations don't understand each other, it feels like it is. They're both right in their own way.
Yeah.
And I just want people listening, watching, consuming this, to go to their brother and sister or father and say, there's some things that just aren't working. Can we talk about this? Or if you've got someone that needs to be fired, if your nephew or your own kid, your own child works for you and says, you know what, you're doing more harm than good. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just might not be the thing you want to do. I think you'd be happier doing something else. Let's look for a transition of, I give you a month to go to some interviews. I'll keep paying you, whatever. But you got to have those, because you said it
Hmm.
earlier, when you do, there's just an inescapable exasperation. Like, finally, now
Yeah.
we can move ahead. Now we can go forward. It's not tense. It's not, even at home, it's not so bad. I just don't want anybody to miss the opportunity to, this business is not for everybody. And it's certainly not
Right.
always for our family.
Yeah. You know, real quick before we wrap this up, I just had a conversation with an owner who has a son who's working age, and he actually told his son, look, if you decide that this is the business for you, great. But I don't want you deciding that until you've gone to work for 5 years for someone else.
Mm, that's good.
So he sent his child away to go work for someone else, and they're getting close to that 5 year mark, and they're starting to have conversations about what does it look like. And now that the child has this other experience, they've got some ideas, and now they're asking questions about what would it look like to implement this idea into the business. And so it's really generated some interesting conversation, and the child knows it's here if I want it, but I'm not obligated in any way, because
Mm,
the business is running well, got a good team, and they've got some growth planned for the next few years. If it aligns and it works out well, great. If not, that's fine too. And I think if you can get to that point, whether you're the one taking the business over or you are the one that's setting your business up for your child to take it over, having that type of that working relationship with your family um, is really good. Get that outside perspective,
Yeah.
bring it back, have loose conversations, and see if it works. Don't force it.
That's a very mature approach too. I do know some
Hmm.
people that have never worked for anybody but their own family. So they're so blind to they're tone deaf. They're in a vacuum. They don't
Yeah,
even know
they are.
this must be the way all businesses run. And then you go and find out like, gosh, they're completely different and better. And maybe some areas we don't have it as bad as we thought we did. So I think that's a
Right.
very, very good thing. Toby, what I'll say is if anybody wants to discuss this dynamic and improve their company, they could probably meet us in Whitefish, Montana in late June and come to our retreat. We're having a restoration business retreat, not like anything you probably have ever been to. It's going to be really a place to go and do a reset, but a deep dive into not our issues and not issues that everybody else has established that they're dealing with, but your own. So that might be a good place to get away and around other people who probably have confronted this or are right in the middle of it. So we're going to be real small. What about 25 to 30 people max?
Yep.
A
Hmm.
real small event. Just as much like Toby always says, as much bonfire and coffee as it is. There's no slides. There's none of the
No
typical trade show.
presentation.
No presentation.
Yep.
No vendors. No sponsors. This is about you to go back. But if you haven't been to Montana, we do this every year. This is our third, I think, in Montana. And
Yes.
everyone always says, wow, this was the pinnacle. Like we go to all the trade shows and the experience and the RA, and those are great for what they're great at. But I was so clear for months after. So consider that. We'll put the link down below. It's definitely a place where we can uncover this, and maybe other people in the group have dealt with it. And maybe someone there is who you can send your sibling or child to go work for 5 years for somebody else.
Yeah.
maybe they're in that audience, man. But good
Yeah.
stuff. I'd love to hear some feedback from people. I've gotten some good feedback from a few people over the last few weeks on some of the other ones that we've I think we're hitting a good things that people deal with every day, and I hope we continue to do that. But this is one that we've never confronted, but it's certainly a big boulder in front of a lot of people.
Yeah. We deal with this on almost on the daily probably, and it's interesting. Until you just literally just said that, I hadn't thought of it, that we haven't really talked about this topic on the public front. So
I think it's very personal. I think it's a very personal thing.
It can be, yeah.
It can be, and I think that's why we've avoided it, because it's kind of we would choose to like to not be involved with family, but sometimes we can't get to the issue until we solve this, and because the issue that is there is within and beneath that. Like we've got a sales problem. Well, y'all don't see it sales the same way, and what's going on. So, well, hopefully this helps some folks. Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Toby. I hope this really resonated with some folks, and reach out to us and have a call. Just if we can help you clear out some of the mud, if we can do a personality assessments, but sometimes just being a third party, jumping in the ring, being an umpire is what people need. You need because there's so much like sibling rivalry or family rivalry, saying someone's got to be right. How about you hire a professional to come in right? So if that's something you want to talk about, let's have a tailgate chat and see if it's a fit. If not, keep doing what you're doing and make Thanksgiving pretty awkward. Appreciate having everybody on. Thank you, Toby. We'll see you next week on the next podcast.
All right, buddy. See ya.